one of the things that I think I need to impress on you all before I really get into this course is that all the knowledge and power of the universe, everything that you need to know about yourself is already encoded in your DNA. I am not here to try to re-encode what is built within you. The only reason why you can't access it, which is the reason why I am here, is because you are oftentimes distracted by outside stimulation. All right. This is why we say that true attention is the act of turning inward to observe yourself. And that's true attention. That is what I want you to do throughout this course. It's been said that attention is the focus of life. Attention is truly charged harmonics from the blood arranged in a fractal embed. I'm going to explain what that means in just a second. Attention allows us to sustain focus on these harmonics. Attention allows you to organize the proteins of your own DNA in the exact order that your archetypal light self, what's called the I and I, was originally meant to. When I'm talking about attention, I'm talking about true attention, free will, operating to self-steer your own conscious evolution. This is not about me as a teacher. This is about you self-steering your conscious evolution, wherever you may be on your path. Some of you all may be further along on your path than others. Again, first time listening, listen as a student. Second time listening, listen as a teacher. Attention allows you to disassemble illusion. Attention allows you to disassemble illusion, which is why I've always said, and I continue to tell you, that if you know the truth from within, then you cannot be lied to or deceived from without. Attention allows you to disassemble illusion and chromatically reassemble vibratory wave patterns to interface directly into other dimensions, specifically the fifth dimension. All right? Don't be frightened by anything that I'm saying. I'm not trying to be, egg-headed. I'm going to break all this down, and it's going to make perfect sense to you by the time that this module is done. When I say chromatically reassemble vibratory wave patterns, what am I talking about? The word chromosome, if we break it down, means what? Chroma, from the Greek. Unfortunately, we're living in this Greco-Roman system, or a derivative thereof, but the word chroma means what? Light. The word soma means what? Body. And so when we're talking about the work that we're doing on the intangibles of our being, we are calling it light work. It is work done on and in concert with one's light body. When we talk about vibratory wave patterns, everything in the universe is vibratory. In fact, in Kemetic science, it is believed that matter is neither created nor is it destroyed. It just changes form. Which is why in those original, and that's one of the laws of thermodynamics as well, which is why in those original texts, it was said that Atum manifested creation through what? Condensation, bringing matter together. Not creating it, bringing matter together into new configurations. That's going to be important for what we're going to talk about here in just a second. I do want to talk a little bit about the symbol that you see on that on this page. Is anyone familiar with this symbol?
Seen it, but not really know what it means.
Okay, so this breaks down into a word that is pronounced by us as Merkaba. Merkaba, M-E-R-K-A-B-A. In ancient Egypt, which is what it's called in the West, it is properly called Kemet. In ancient Kemet, this was a primal pattern broken down into three words, not one. Mer. Mer means light, all right? Mer describes the light coming off of the sun, light that rotates. Ka, you all are familiar with this. This is one of the 5 parts of the Kemetic soul. Pause. There are, in some interpretations, 9 parts of the Kemetic soul, but we're not talking about the physical part of the being, right? Because the other 4 parts were physical. We're talking about the light body, right? So Ka means spirit, in this case referring to the human spirit, and of course Ba means body. So this symbol encompasses the connection between what?
Mind,
Spirit and body.
I am spirit.
Exactly. And the divine essence that bridges the two, that holds the two together, that permeates the two, okay? So this is a symbol for mind, body, and the divine light. Okay, so again, Merkaba. Because some people look at this and they think it's a pentagram, it's something satanic, or it's something Jewish. Because Jews have a very similar symbol. But this is what we call sacred geometry, all right? And I think we're going to get into this during metaphysics, right? So here's what we're going to be talking about. Today, we're going to be talking about the 4 circles of your relationship element. We're going to be talking about realigning your career and academic element with your NIA next week. Week 3, we're going to be talking about the physical element. Week 4, exploring African spirituality and unlocking the 5th dimension. The 5th dimension. All right? I want you all to remember that. And then week 5, we're going to be talking about structuring your resource element to manifest your purpose. One of the things that you're going to hear me repeat is divinity, 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 right? In the Black and conscious community, divinity of the Black man and woman is asserted because one of the ways that divinity is expressed is through what? Creative alchemy. Divinity is expressed in orders of magnitude of creation. How much you are able to create, all right? For those of you all who can't see the screen, let me just read this out. Man can create new configurations of the atom, but cannot create the atom itself. Whereas animals cannot reconfigure their reality except through instinctive and unconscious survival mechanisms, right? Your golden retriever can build itself a burrow, but can't fix your carburetor. And absolutely can't manufacture a carburetor. Both physical creatures are endowed with divine essence, what the Yoruba call Ashe, but only humanity, through our ability to willfully create, can be called divine. In the conscious community, Africans, the mothers and fathers of civilization, gave birth to humanity both culturally and intellectually as well. Our sciences, when applied, have the capacity to exceed those of any other group of the planet. If you do not believe that, no other group has come close to being able to reconstruct the pyramid. The language of pictograms that we created was the most complex on the planet. In fact, and this is a sidebar, if you all took the Stolen Legacy course, we talked about the importance of phonemes. Is anyone familiar with phonemes? You all know what phonemes are?
Yeah.
No.
No.
For the queen who said yes, break it down.
Phonemes are the basic sounds used to form words.
Absolutely. Absolutely. These are the building blocks of language. These are the atoms of language, right? So if we break down a word into the sound or the frequency of origin, right? So we can't break it down any further. We have what's known as a phoneme. For instance, ka, ka, ka. That is a phoneme, ka. There's no way that I can break that down further. If we're talking about KH, as in or QU, as in Quran. Actually, QU is a whole different phoneme. It's right. So that is a phoneme. Phonemes are indicative of the level of intelligence and processing capability that a language has. And if you don't believe in the juxtaposition of inferiority and superiority of languages, try to learn Xhosa, which is pronounced Xhosa.
Spell it?
Try to learn that language. Xhosa. Try to learn that language. English is a walk in the park. These are what we call tonal languages. Languages where the tone changes the entire meaning of the word. Languages that are so packed with phonemes that it requires an entirely new region of the brain to process, thus increasing your intelligence in the process of learning that language. You've been dumbed down in the West. I'm off on tangent. Let me get back on tangent, family. I say all that to say this. You've been endowed with the divinity to shape the universe around you. I want you to accept that. You have been endowed with the divine power to shape the universe around you. Denial of that ability is a denial of your divinity. Whereas your willingness to create new realities is the highest expression of your God nature. That's what this course is about. Now, what does all this have to do with Black consciousness? What does all this have to do with Black consciousness? According to Dr. Naeem Akbar, who wrote a book called Know Thyself, he breaks down Black consciousness as this. And by the way, that's one of the master teachers from back in the day, Dr. Naeem Akbar. But he wrote a book called Know Thyself, which you all should read. Very quick read. You can get it done in a weekend. Know Thyself is the name of the book. He says that Black consciousness is four things. It's a knowledge of who you are, how you came to be, the world around you, and your place in that world. That's what Black consciousness is. Anybody need me to repeat that if you're taking notes?
Yes.
Yes, please.
All right. The first aspect of Black consciousness is a knowledge of who you are. Who you are. Those are the five elements of life. There's nothing about you that is, was, or ever will be that falls outside of the five elements of life. Let me say that again. This is the first point of knowledge of self. There's nothing about you that is, was, or ever will be that falls outside of the five elements of life. That is who you are. The second pillar of Black consciousness is how you came to be. We're talking about Black history. We're talking about your Egun, your great Shefsu, your bloodlines, your ancestry, right? That's how you came to be. The third pillar of Black consciousness is the world around you. This is what we typically call, these are the two nines in the 959. In the Pan-African Alliance and also members of United Black America, you'll hear us say 959. We'll talk about 959. The 959, the two nines are the 9 areas of life and the 9 weapons of white supremacy. That's the world around you, okay? So the 9 areas of life: economics, entertainment, education, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and warfare. You don't need to write that down. We'll go over it again later on. And if that sounds familiar, that's coming from Baba Neely Fuller's compensatory code and his contemporary, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, peace be upon her, who's made her transition. So the 9 areas of life: economics, entertainment, education, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and warfare. The 9 weapons of white supremacy. Let me see if I remember these: miseducation, miscegenation, murder, infection, intoxication, prosecution, eugenics, fraud, and integration. Integration, when one's culture comes to resemble that of another's. So that's the world around you. That's the third pillar of Black consciousness. And then the fourth pillar is your place in that world, what we call your Nia. Nia is N-I-A, is a Kiswahili word that means purpose. And I should have mentioned this while I was on a tangent earlier. If you have not identified your Nia, if you have not gone through that process, then a lot of this is going to be useless to you. How can you align your 5 elements with your Nia if you have not identified your Nia? See, this is the difference between living on purpose and living by default, right? So if you have not taken the time to identify your Nia, I need to know about it. I need to know if you have not yet identified your life's purpose, and we will go through that process as much as I can from a distance. And if you are close to me, I'm going to be in Atlanta towards the end of this month. Right now, I'm here in Indianapolis, and I'm also going to be going back to Kentucky soon, unfortunately. So if y'all are in any of those areas, we can meet face to face. I can't give you a divination, but I can connect you to someone who can. All right, a real divination, not no who's the Jamaican lady back in the day? You know who I'm talking about. The psychic.
Miss Cleo.
Miss Cleo. I'm gonna give you all the real deal, right? So we got the 4 pillars of Black consciousness: a knowledge of who you are, how you came to be, the world around you, and your place in that world. That's what makes up consciousness. When we talk about the 5 elements, I mentioned the fact that everything that you are, everything that you were, and everything that you will be is encompassed by these 5 elements. If you can't see my screen, I'm going to read this out for you very briefly. The 5 elements are mechanisms by which you will be able to self-reflect and self-direct your powers of manifestation towards your highest purpose. The 5 elements of life are the physical, the metaphysical, your academic element from which your career should spring, your resources, which include your time and your money, and your relationships. All right? So those are the 5 elements of life. That's what this has to do with Black consciousness. This gives you a template to organize yourself. Because when we say Black consciousness, we can get into the weeds as to what we mean. Are we talking about mysticism and metaphysics? Are we talking about a knowledge of history? Are we talking about, what are we talking about here? But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about those 4 pillars that make up Black consciousness: a knowledge of who you are, how you came to be, the world around you, and your place in that world, which is unique to other groups. Okay, so when we're talking about the relationship element, the reason why this module is first is not only because it's the most important, and that's kind of subjective. To me, this is the most important element, right? I think unity is one of the biggest problems that we're facing in the community. But not just that, but because everything else that you do is subordinate to this element. This is going to take you the most time. When I say that, your relationship with yourself is the foundation and origin of everything that you create. And for some of you all, it's taken you, 18 years, 28 years, 48 years, 68 years. I'm not going to tell you how many of my years it's taken or more to remove you from your essence. It's taken 18 to 68, maybe 78 years to remove you from your essence. And it might take just as much time to restore you to your rightful identity. That's because the damage done to you by one hateful act in one brief instant, that can require years of healing to recover from. And even if you recover from it, it'll leave a scar. Don't we all carry childhood scars on our physical bodies?
Yeah.
Well into adulthood.
Yeah.
And the same can be said of our light bodies. And needless to say, the damage done to us by 400 years of the Ma'afa has created a whole collective miseducation, cultivating an alien identity, further removing us from our divinity. And the only way that these conditions can be rectified is through self-direction. Thus, if you want to have any hope of changing your destiny or the world around you or mastering your 5 elements, then this first relationship, the relationship with yourself, is the one that you must spend the most time cultivating. You are the only constant in a universe of variables. Likewise, you're the only aspect of that universe that you can be in control of. And the relationship that you cultivate with yourself can cultivate a heaven or a hell in the world around you. Let me give you an example. Black women, mothers of our community, mothers of civilization, mothers of humanity. The Black woman who's cultivated a righteous relationship with herself, she becomes the matriarch from which generations of strength and wealth and wisdom and success spring. But she whose divine essence has been corroded by the lower self become the source of society's troubles, whose men are feral and whose children crave chaos, right? So if there's one thing that the universal law of correlation teaches us, it's that there's no such thing as neutrality, all right? You're surrounded by and influenced profoundly by the relationships that you're in because their vibrations, their vibratory wave patterns interact with your own. Show me the people that you are around and I will show you your future. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Thus, once the painful but necessary work of self-cultivation has begun, you've also got to simultaneously surround yourself with new energies that affirm and support your rebirth, family. This is not going to work if you let weeds grow in your garden. That analogy that we were using earlier, a newly cultivated garden must be free of weeds, lest those weeds consume the fruit that is born forth. So the best way for us to deal with others is to first do what? Deal with ourselves. Then we're going to start dealing with our other circle. All right. So at the end of this session, you're going to be able to leverage the power of emotional alchemy to make the lower self the servant of the higher self. Your objective here, my objective here, our objective here is not the elimination of the lower self. It is to make the lower self the servant of the higher self. One cannot eliminate one's lower self. We'll talk about that in just a second. And there's an excellent parable that comes from comedic science. And it's one of the stories of, it's the latter part of the epic of Heru and Set, okay? So I'm not gonna go into the whole epic, but at the end of the battle between Heru and Set, Heru does not destroy Set. Instead, Heru binds him and casts him to the lower lands, all right? Whereas Heru becomes the Lord of the white sands, Set becomes the Lord of the red sands, right? This is the relationship between Upper and Lower Kemet, and they work together. There's an armistice between the two. Heru does not kill Set in the original translation, but we'll get into that in just a second. So at the end of this week, you're going to be able to leverage the power of emotional alchemy to make the lower self the servant of the higher self, to cultivate relationships that are reflections of your Nia, and to leverage the collective intelligence of your peers to solve problems that you struggle with the most in this element of life. I do need to define what we mean when we say relationships. And it is important that we define the relationship because we need to all be on the same page, right? We need to be vibrating on the same wavelength. It is your connection to yourself, your ancestors, and those around you. Yourself, quote unquote, is the mediator between your internal and external realities. Yourself is the mediator between your internal and external realities. There are 4 circles. There are 4 circles. Those 4 circles are, here we go. Now we're back in order. Relationship with yourself, that is the first circle. The second circle, your extended family, all right? Third circle, your peers. Fourth circle, your enlighteners and your proteges, all right? 2 of those circles are inherited. 2 of those circles are created. Let's talk about the first circle. We're going to spend a lot of time here. If you cannot see my screen, these are the aspects of the first circle: your personality, your emotions, and your lower and higher self. All right? Your personality, your emotions, and your lower and higher self. None of these things are your true essence, but they are aspects of your first circle, right? At the center of your circle is your true essence, which we're going to talk about when we get into metaphysics. This is the 5th dimension. These are aspects that do not exist on this plane of space-time. This is not spookism. This is not illogical. I'm going to break it down to you in some very academic ways very shortly. But if you can't see the screen, okay, your personality, the combination of characteristics or qualities that form your distinctive character, your emotions, a physiological experience. Emotions are physiological. They happen in the body first. That present a state of awareness, giving you information about the world around you. And then your higher and lower self, modulations between balance and imbalance that bring one closer to or farther from their destiny and divinity. Okay? So let's get into personality first. If you have not done so, there's a website that you can go to take a very simple personality test. It's 16personalities.com, 16personalities.com. Even if you have taken a personality test in the past for, say, a job or, typically they give you one if you're in college prep, take it again, because now you have a reason to take it. You have a reason to take it. Our objective here is to harness the energies and capabilities of your unique personality towards the achievement of your Nia. Maybe when you took it the first few times, you weren't serious about it, but now it becomes a very serious part of your development. 16personalities.com. Do not take it while I'm going through the course. While you're going through the course, take it after. It's a very short test. I'm also going to give you some other resources to narrow your personality down. Even if you don't know what to do with this information, hold on to it and it'll become evident over time. 16 personalities. Let me go into personalities very briefly. There's an acronym that psychologists use to describe one's personality, and it's OCEAN, O-C-E-A-N, all right? And OCEAN stands for openness to experience. In other words, how open to experiences are you? We know some brothers and sisters who are set in their ways, completely not open to new experiences, which means they stay locked in Christianity. They stay locked in dogma. They stay locked in philosophies that may be outdated or inefficient or ineffective. Openness to experience. Conscientiousness is the C, conscientiousness. In other words, how diligent are you? How capable are you of achieving something that you set out to do? Right? How much gumption do you have? How much of an ability to stick with something do you have? Do you read 3 sentences, get frustrated, and throw the book down? Or are you able to suffer through? Extroversion, introversion is the E. How extroverted are you? How introverted are you? There are strengths and weaknesses with both. I'm very introverted, giving me a lot of time to devote to studying and reflection and ensuring that I craft my words in ways that are appropriate for the situation that I'm delivering them in. Whereas extroverts, they are charged by, rather than being exhausted by, people. I'll just put it like that. Y'all know what I'm getting at. Moving forward. Agreeableness. How agreeable are you, right? And how willing are you to engage other people, right? Agreeableness. And then finally, what they call neuroticism, but what can be defined more appropriately as emotional stability. Okay, when I say neuroticism is a mental illness that's not caused by a disease, or what they've classified as a mental illness. And of course, they being those architects of the DSM. Now, this is not to disqualify the efficacy of science. This is to challenge the spirituality of his science, right? So I'm not saying that it doesn't work, right? I'm not saying that it doesn't work. A knife cuts regardless. What cuts? What is it cutting is the issue, right? How is this knowledge being used? Nuclear science can be used to take us to the edges of the universe, arguably. Nuclear science can be used to take us to the edges of the universe. But with divinity removed from it, it's used to kill on unprecedented levels. You see that? Y'all feel me on that?
Yeah.
Hot button issue right here. Vaccination works. Some of the first people to vaccinate themselves on the planet were your ancestors. And it'll disgust you if I told you how they did it. Vaccination works. But man's science is always inferior to nature's science. Let me give you an example. Many of our people have sickle cell anemia, right? It's a disease, a so-called disease that is unique to our people, right? Y'all following me? Unaelewa?
Yeah.
Sickle cell is an adaptation on the part of your ancestors to deal with the presence of malaria in their environment. When your blood cells curve, malaria has a more difficult time attaching to those cells, which means it has a more difficult time propagating through the system. So your natural intelligence immunizes you over time. But of course, here in the West, they say, well, that's a disease and it'll kill you. Well, absolutely. When it's being, see, I'm really getting off on tangent. Let me get back on topic here.
Can you finish that one though?
Exactly. Finish that.
Stop in the middle of one.
Well, I'm still in my own thunder from our discussion on the physical element. When you apply a Western diet to Eastern physiology, pathology is the result, right? Sicknesses, illnesses, and complications that are attributed to sickle cell anemia are in reality deficiencies within the diet. Treatments that brothers and sisters suffering from sickle cell anemia go through aggravate the condition. But of course they would though, because this is a pathological and neurotic system, a system that feeds on your suffering. It is not designed to deliver you from your suffering. A recent study was done, and I don't put too much credence in these studies, but it's relevant to our conversation. The United States is one of the least happy of all so-called developed societies. But the funny thing about it is, in all my travels across the African diaspora, I've never met a group of people as happy as our people are when we're in our natural conditions. You'll look at children playing, playing their games in dirt streets, surrounded by mud huts. And coming from the West, you'd look at them as being uncivilized, right? This is a third world country. But nowhere are they more connected to themselves, one another, and their earth than in these places that have shunned or been passed over by the so-called material blessings of the West. All right, I'm really off on tangent. Let me get back on, family. Neuroticism comes from a number of different places. Neuroticism, which is again mental illness, it comes from depression, anxiety, obsessive behavior, hypochondria, stress, a loss of touch with reality. All right. And here's why dealing with your personality type is so important. And I alluded to this earlier. We all have limited amounts of energy, right? We all have limited amounts of energy in our physical form. In our metaphysical form, you are boundless. You're not bound by space or time. Managing our energy in ways that align with our personality will make us more capable of manifesting our will. All right? So what I want you to do is, I don't want you to change your personality. I want you to understand your strengths and use those strengths to advance you towards your needs. Some introverts that I speak to, because we live in such an extroverted society, a society where everyone is pressured to put all their information out there on social media or act like they're TV personalities on YouTube, or, you know, constantly be in people's face and soliciting favor from people that you don't know and probably wouldn't like if you knew them, right? It's a superficial society that we live in. Introverts feel under attack by the system, but I'm telling them they have strengths that they have yet to master that will make them more efficient. I would have made a different career decision. Pardon me. I would have made a different career decision, tongue twister, had I respected my personality type. All right. So I did sales for a long time, and while I appreciated the skill set that I picked up, I would have done something different with my energy because I was absolutely miserable, and ultimately it led to my collapse. So that's personality. All right. That's the first aspect of your first circle. Second aspect, your emotions. All right. Your emotions. There are currently two main scientific ways of explaining the nature of emotions. According to the cognitive appraisal theory, emotions are judgment about the extent that the current situation meets your goals. Let me say that again. This is important. Emotions are judgment about the extent that a current situation meets your goals. All right. Happiness is the evaluation that your goals are being satisfied. You are happy when you are satisfying your goals. You're not happy participating in Western rituals of consumerism or consumption. These things do not make you happy. All right. Alternatively, others have argued that emotions are perceptions of changes in your body. On this view, happiness is a kind of physiological perception, not a judgment. All right. In other words, your body's state will tell you what emotions you are dealing with. Why is this important? And by the way, you're constantly cycling through emotions. This is a never-ending process, all right? When motion ceases, so too does life. Emotions are the undercurrent of your consciousness and a bridge to your truth, all right? Emotions are designed to give you more information about the world around you. So when you're angry, rather than reacting to your anger, start to decode the information that that anger is trying to give you. Why am I angry? What is the source of this anger? Because your emotions give you the opportunity to deal with unresolved issues. Emotions give you the opportunity to move closer to rather than farther away from your divinity. For a long time, I had issues with anger. All right? For a long time, I had issues with anger. And when I started to assess why I had issues with anger and why I engaged in certain behavior, right? So once upon a time, I was 200 pounds, right, of muscle, not a fat. I was 200 pounds of muscle. I was obsessive about going to the gym. I was obsessive with how I looked. And it is because as a child, we grew up very poor. I come from a very poor family. I'm talking about eating ketchup and bread for dinner most days. I'm talking about having to boil bath water to have a hot bath. I'm talking about walking to school and developing blisters from wearing the same shoes year after year, right? That kind of poor. And because of that, I was always smaller than other children. In addition to that, because I was smarter, which is kind of unfortunate, but whatever, I started school early, meaning when other kids were, 6 years old, I was 4 years old, which means I was always smaller than all the other children. Smarter, but smaller and more handsome, but whatever. But this created a kind of neuroticism within me, right? I felt like I always needed to be bigger, right? And I also felt that anger that I felt as a child. by being physically inferior to others. And I carried that anger into adulthood, and it started manifesting itself in negative ways, ways that were harmful for me. But that's just an example of what emotions are trying to tell you. You have unresolved issues. And once you've identified those issues, you can start challenging them. One of the ways that I challenged that was, does it truly make me inferior? Right? And we're going to talk about this when we talk about emotional alchemy. But one of the things that one of my mentors did with me was she inflated my exaggeration, right? She said, okay, you're what, 190, 200 pounds now? Why don't you bump it up to 300 pounds? Why don't you bump it up to 400 pounds? How big is going to be big enough? When will you ever be big enough to be beyond what happened to you as a child? When will you ever be big enough to be beyond what happened to you as a child? If you've had something traumatic happen to you in your childhood, say, I have.
I have.
I have.
I have. I have, definitely.
I have.
So we've got to, as light workers, be more cognizant of what our emotions are trying to indicate to us so that we can move closer to our divinity, which is truly superior to emotions. There's a state of calm, serenity, and awareness that being present endows you with. Some of you will rarely experience this, but if you are meditators, you'll experience it frequently, right? And that's something that should be cultivated until you do not need to sit to meditate because you are always in a state of meditation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That is the ultimate objective of meditation. It is not to sit infinitely. It is to be able to stand and walk and move through this plane of existence in a state of oneness so that you are always meditating. Let's talk about the lower and the higher self because we're going to spend a lot of time here. I like this passage that I read in the Circle 7 Quran. All right, and this is from the Moore Science Temple. This is chapter 4, verse 21. The only devil from which men and women must be redeemed is the lower self. If man would find his devil, he must look within. All right. If man or woman would find his devil or her devil, he or she must look within. A lot of these books are misogynist by nature, so I got to insert queens into the topic. So that's chapter 4, verse 21 of the Circle 7 Quran. So when we're talking about the devil, what we're talking about is our devil. We're talking about the lower self. This is that modulation between balance and imbalance that I mentioned. We're going to talk about Mayat versus his Fet in just a second. But when we talk about redeeming ourselves from the devil, in Christianity, there's a lot of talk of redemption, and Islam as well. In fact, all the Abrahamic religions. But when we're talking about redemption, we're talking about the action of saving or being saved from sin, evil, or the action of regaining or gaining possession of something, right? That's what redemption means. So when we're talking about redemption, we're not talking about the elimination of anything. We're not talking about eliminating anything. Your lower self is as much a part of your first circle as your higher self. You cannot eliminate your lower self. There is no separation between the lower self and the higher self. First of all, let me break down what I'm talking about when I talk about the lower self and the higher self. If you study comedic science, then you know that this is the difference between Mayat and his Fet. So Mayat and his Fet. Mayat represents change and balance, and his Fet represents stagnation and imbalance. When we're talking about the lower self, we're talking about its Fet. There are 15 characteristics. I want to make sure I give these to you all in the PDF, and I'm just going to list them very quickly. They are covetousness, selfishness, falsehood, which includes dogmatism and hypocrisy, atrocities, promiscuity, promiscuity being defined as lack of sexual discrimination, deep narcissism. Deep narcissism is an important one we're going to talk about. Negativity, overwhelming shame about ourselves, schadenfreude, an inability to relate with others, extremism and polarity, distrust and untrustworthiness, argumentativeness, impulsivity, cowardice, and that's it. So let me go in on a few of these. I used a German
Sounds
word.
like what the lust of the flesh. That's
That's absolutely part of it. But when we go through these aspects of his set, most of them center around two things: selfishness and falsehood. Selfishness and falsehood. So let me touch on a few of these. I mentioned Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is a German word that means when you see somebody doing good, you feel inclined to wish ill on them. All right. Instead of being happy for them, you hate on them on the slide. That's what Schadenfreude is. All right. When I talk about cowardice, I'm not talking about fear. Fear is an emotion. Cowardice is lack of right action in the face of fear. You know you should do something, but you don't do it. That's cowardice. All right. When I use the word dogmatism, I'm talking about the tendency to lay down principles as incontrovertibly true without considering evidence of otherwise. In other words, if I tell you that, or if you believe dogmatically that our people come from one place and one place only, and that is North America, and I give you evidence to suggest otherwise, you don't even consider that evidence. You don't even think about it. And this feeds into deep narcissism. You want to be right. You've got to be right. Let's talk about deep narcissism for just a minute. All right. When I say deep narcissism, what do you all think I mean? Can somebody give me a working definition of narcissism?
in my opinion, it's just rooted in selflessness. It's all about what you think, who you are, and a lot of it is in your own mind. One of the reasons why I'm starting to just hate social media. It's all about people who think they're so much more than what they really are. And that's what they portray, and that's what they put out there. And 9 times out of 10, if you do the background work, is so full of BS, it's ridiculous. They portray something that they want the world to believe, although they know in their hearts that they are not really that person that they're trying to portray.
Mm-hmm. Anybody want to add on?
I think it's more, it can be on a personal level, it's more so, it doesn't even have to be the outside people. It can be the people that's closest to you, or the person is so full of themselves that they want to make themselves right. They want to rationalize and justify their behavior. And the narcissism is so rampant that they will convince you that their thinking is right, even though they know it's wrong. They so self-centered, they will maintain and hold on to a lie over a lie over a lie that they're right. That's my viewpoint of it.
Yeah, agree.
Just as Queen Andra mentioned, in today's day and age of social media, with people being so full of themselves, it's important for us to recognize and understand deep narcissism. First of all, let me say this. All of us are somewhere on the narcissistic spectrum. When I say narcissism, all I'm talking about is self-regard, how you regard yourself, how you look at yourself. When we talk about narcissists, we are talking about people who are on one side or the other of that polarity. All right. They have an exaggerated view of themselves. Let me say that again. They have an exaggerated view of themselves. They think that they are too much or not enough. Both of these are examples of deep narcissism. So let's break it down. Go all the way back to childhood. As children, we're either given too much attention, and I'm talking about the deep narcissist. As children, the deep narcissist is either given too much attention from their parents, and that gives them an emotional high. They feed on that, they crave it, and they want more and more of it. And the more of it that child demands, the more of it the parent gives, the more addicted that child becomes to attention. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is the child who did not get enough attention from their parents. The child who was left alone to cry. The child who was left alone in the first 7 years of their life, by and large, whose parents may have been so concerned with their own issues because they were strung out on drugs, didn't want to have children, they were working all the time, that this child had to create a fantasy land within herself or within himself, where he or she was the center of attention, getting the attention from their fantasies that they should have been getting from the world around them. And in their fantasies, they exaggerate themselves. They make themselves the ruler over a fantasy land. And they come to believe this role that they've created in their head, because nothing ever steps in their life to correct that role. The parents are busy. The teachers don't give a damn. Maybe here and there you have a teacher that inspires you and says, you can be great. But by the time that you hit that level at 7 years old and older, your deep narcissism is already set in. And so because that child has been left alone for so much of their life, and they've created this exaggerated view of themselves in their head, they become narcissists later on in life. They become quiet narcissists, but they're still narcissists. Both of these forms of narcissism, too much and too little, both produce insecurity. They are perpetually insecure. If you attack the deep narcissist's knowledge, so for instance, y'all sitting out there, y'all listening to me, and one of the brothers is like, Assad, I hear what you're saying, but I disagree with you. I disagree with you on covetousness or whatever. Me as a deep narcissist would take offense to that. How dare you challenge me? This is my kingdom. And I would attack you in turn, or I would try and shut you down in turn, right? Or a deep narcissist, on the other end of the spectrum, would say, you know what, that brother is right. Not only is that brother right, who am I to even be teaching? I don't know shit. So I'm going to go back into my own mind, keep all this knowledge to myself in a place where I rule, right? And I'm going to preserve my little fantasy land, my deep narcissistic views of myself, and not put them out there in the world to be challenged. You all see how that works?
Yeah.
Is this making sense to the rest of you all? Was that a good example? Can some of y'all relate to
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
I can.
Definitely true.
Let me tell you something. If you have a deep narcissist in your life, there is no cure. There is no amount of attention that you can give them that would rival their parents. There's no amount of attention that you can give them that will fill the chasm of their low self-esteem. I was in a relationship with a deep narcissist. She was a Scorpio. And at first I thought, well, maybe I'm just incompatible with Scorpios.
Or Libras.
Which I might be, which I probably am, but whatever. Moving forward, I hope ain't no Scorpios on. And I put so much energy into this queen. I put forth, and I just couldn't understand why she behaved the way that she behaved, right? And it's because there's no amount that you can, there's no amount of energy, love, attention, and positivity that you can give to these people that would fill that chasm or replace the energy that they were given by their parents, right? And it turns out, as I explored her background, because I was getting better at relationship building. If you all know me, you all know I'm notoriously bad at building relationships. I'm bad at building relationships. I know this, which is why I've worked on it so hard, and I'm aiming to be good at it. But when I explored her background, it turns out, she never told me this, but when she was 4, her mother abandoned her with her father, and her father sexually abused her from the age of 4 until about the age of 10. And then after that, her father just didn't have anything to do with her, stopped feeding her, didn't ask her to go to school, didn't take care of her. So now she's running around in the street. Now she's in abandoned buildings having sex to have her needs met. And this created a pattern of behavior that carried on into her adult life. And here she is 27, right? So that's that. That's the lower self. That's the lower self.
But then, you know what, aside in a situation like that, it leaves you in a place where you start to question yourself because you love the person so much, but you just can't seem to love them enough to fill whatever that crazy void is within their life. And if you're not careful, it leaves you in a place where, again, you start to feel like your love isn't good enough. What you're giving isn't good enough. You're trying your best to help this person to see, you know, all the things that you are able to see about them. But regardless of your best effort, it ends up, if you're not careful, sucking you in. Of, you know, because you're trying to fix it. You're trying to fill that, whatever that void is in their life, whatever that hurt is, whatever, you're trying so hard to be who you are and fix it and show them love and show them how love is supposed to be. But at the end of the day, it ends up all your attempts end up just being futile.
That's 100. That's 100. Which is why it's so critical as a divine being for you to know how to assess those vibrations around you, right? For you to truly know the people that you're around. We're going to touch on this in just a second. And now that I do have the power to help her, if I ever come across her again, which is unlikely, now I do have that power, right? I have the power to help her start to slowly strip away those, if she wants it, right? Remember, all of this centers around your divine will. Thy will be done. Moving forward, because I'm off on the sidebar, let's talk about the higher self now. Let's talk about Mayat. When we talk about Mayat, 15 characteristics, we're talking about justice and balance. We're talking about right judgment. We're talking about integrity or truth. We're talking about bearing. In the Yoruba culture, bearing is called Ifarabale. Ifarabale. It's how you carry yourself, right? Carrying yourself in the right way. Reciprocity, which is the opposite of selfishness. Courage. We talked about courage, which is the opposite of cowardice. Action in the face of action in the face of fear, rather than in spite of it. We talked about knowledge, right? Knowledge in Yoruba is something called imo, and it's something that is constantly cultivated. And then, in all things, seek understanding. That's a proverb from Christianity for you Christians listening. Compassion, which is the opposite of lack of empathy. Compassion. See, narcissists, one of the aspects of their neuroticism is a lack of empathy. They don't care about nobody else. They don't care about nobody else because on one side of the polarity, they were given so much attention that they didn't need to care about anybody else. And caring about anybody else would compromise the amount of attention that they got. And on the other end of the spectrum, they didn't care. They don't care about anybody because nobody ever cared about them. You ever hear somebody say that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't give a damn about nobody because nobody ever gave a damn about me.
Yep.
All the time.
Right. This is a form of narcissism. It may not be deep narcissism, but it is a form of narcissism, which is ironic because you would think that narcissists would always have high self-esteem. But in reality, narcissism is ultimately rooted in straight up insecurity. They're scared they're going to lose the love of their parents, or they've never gotten the love of their parents, making them thus insecure. But anyway, moving forward. Endurance and patience. In Yoruba, it's called suyuru. Suyuru, endurance and patience. Owo, which is respect. We have Iso, which is caution. Ogbun, which is wisdom. Oye, which is understanding, order, and harmony. These are aspects of the higher self. All right, these are aspects of the higher self. You are made to rule over, not be enslaved by your lower self. Does that make sense? How are you made to rule over your lower self? Look, family, there's energy in the lower self. When you covet something, that produces an energy with you. When you're envious, that produces an energy within you. Promiscuity is you acting on your sexual energy. Deep narcissism and the insecurity that produces creates energy. The same amount of energy that you apply to hating on people, seeing somebody do well and wishing ill on them, you allow their happiness to be reflected by your happiness. It's kind of like when somebody starts laughing around you and then you start laughing. You don't have a reason to laugh, right? You don't know what's so funny to them. You just know that they're laughing and that makes you laugh. See, this is the opposite of schadenfreude. Does that make sense? So let me talk about performing emotional alchemy. Alchemy is defined as taking something that is worthless and then turning it into something of value. All right? Taking these worthless aspects of your lower self, using the energy that they produce in service of your higher self, in service of Mayad, right? But anyway, when we're talking about emotional alchemy, I'm talking about using your deep narcissism and the energy that you get from that to prove yourself, prove your greatness, right? Reflect your narcissism in your work. Produce work that is so good that the world can't ignore you. And in doing so, you will get the attention that you've sought all your life. And you'll do so by cultivating a skill, by putting out a body of work, as long as it is, of course, righteous, that the world respects. So you can perform emotional alchemy on that deep narcissism and turn that into work that that truly represents your perceived value of yourself. And in doing so, you'll gain skills that make you more valuable. You can use your falsehoods to find the truth. You can magnify your negativity to magnify positivity. In other words, going back to the queen who did light work with me, you know, she magnified my negativity. She magnified the negative aspect. How big is big enough, right? You know, you feel like you're worthless. Okay, well, let's make you more worthless. All right. Are you worthless? Can you walk? Okay, well, let's take that. I guess you can't walk now. You're so worthless, you can't walk. You're so worthless, you might as well just lay down. And in fact, don't lay down on your bed. You're so worthless, lay down on the floor. How much more worthless can you be? Well, let's not shower today. Let's not shower after a week. In fact, promise me you won't shower after a week because you're worthless. You're not worthy of being good. Let's keep going. Should you not eat? Let's not drink. Let's not go outside. Delete your phone. Delete your Facebook account. Delete your Instagram. Delete everything. Empty your bank account. How much more worthless can we make you? You use your shame to cultivate humility. But does that make sense? You magnify your negativity to magnify the positivity. Because what you're doing is you're holding a mirror up to your lower self and saying, you know, this isn't accurate. You transmute destructive impulsivity with positive habits. You see victory beyond cowardice. In other words, of course, we all fear doing something that might require more of us than we're ready to give. But what we do is we see the victory beyond that, which is why we move through our cowardice. We move through our fear in pursuit of victory. And in doing so, we become courageous. So some of the light work I want you all to do is what I call past authoring. I want you to pick scenarios from your past where your lower self produced negative results in your life. And then I'm going to have you re-author those scenarios, knowing what you know now. In other words, I want you to pick a time when your promiscuity. I want you to pick a time when your deep narcissism. I want you to pick a time when your anger, your wrath, your rage, your atrocities got the best of you. Maybe it led you to prison. Maybe it alienated you from a friend. Maybe it costed you a little bit in terms of money. Maybe it costed you some shame. And then we're going to re-author those. All right. And again, I'm going to give you worksheets to do that. So let's move on to aspects of the second circle. Aspects of your second circle, 3 aspects. The Agun. When I say the Agun, that is a Yoruba word. It means ancestors. You'll also hear me use the word Shepsu, Shepsu. That is what your ancestors in Kemet called your ancestors, or the ancestors, the great ancestors. I'm talking about your bloodline. I'm talking about the people that you inherit behaviors from. Because if we go back to the previous slide, the vast majority of the first circle, the relationship that you have with yourself, comes from the first 7 years of social integration and via vectors of mind control. I do need to touch on this very briefly. Vectors of mind control. This is coming from Dr. Phil Valentine. Dr. Phil Valentine teaches us that there are 10 external environmental elements that affect the ways that beliefs are formed, thus universal mind control vectors. These vectors are education, nutrition, pollution, gender roles, public opinion, or collective energy, subliminal seduction and sexualization, metaphysics, media, and medicine. These are all the external ways that your relationship with yourself is formed. I'm just going to pick one out and give you an example. Medicine. If I gave you psychotropics, if I gave you powerful chemicals that affected your psychological state, that would affect your relationship with yourself growing up, which is why Dr. Umar Johnson, regardless of what you believe about him, as research is right and exact, Dr. Umar Johnson is so much of an advocate against pumping pills into our children because you're removing them from their divine essence. You're negatively impacting that first 7 years of their self, and thus creating a personality that may be alien to who they truly are, right? Nutrition. What you eat has a way of affecting how you think, how you behave, your energy levels. I don't think I need to go in on that. That's kind of understood. Education. If you teach someone something about themselves and they come to believe it, then they come to embody it. If you have not read The Miseducation of the Negro, it's required reading, but it goes something like this. If you can control a person's thinking, you don't have to worry about their action. When you determine what a person shall think, through education, by the way, you do not have to make them, you don't have to concern yourself about what he or she will do. If you make a person feel that he or she is inferior through education, you do not have to compel them to accept an inferior status, but they will seek it themselves. If you make a man or woman think that he or she is justly an outcast, you do not have to order him or her to the back door. They will go without being told. And if there is not a back door, their very nature will demand one be created. So that's the first 7 years of your life. And again, if you're listening to this recording in the future, those 10 vectors of mind control, the 10 ways that your relationship with your first circle, yourself, is formed early in life, again, education, nutrition, pollution, gender rolling. In other words, if I am a lesbian couple and I am raising a boy, I am less likely to raise that boy to be a man as I am to raise that boy to be a neutered reflection of my gender role moving forward. Public opinion or collective energy. In other words, the culture that they are born into determines who they ultimately become. Subliminal seduction, sexualization, metaphysics, media, and medicine. You sexualize a child too early, later on in life, they have problems with impulsivity, low self-esteem. Maybe they have drug and alcohol problems. Maybe they have problems forming healthy relationships of their own. Maybe they find themselves constantly distracted, clumsy, which is almost a lower level form of attempted suicide, right? Maybe they are suicidal. All these have effects on who that child becomes, especially if it happens in the first 7 years of their life. The remainder of the first circle is inherited through learned emotional responses and the experiences of your egun. Let me give you an example. Sickle cell anemia, again, a learned response. A learned response. The biology of the body interfacing with the biology of the world around it so that it may survive, passing on those traits to you, right? That's your ancestry. All the physical changes that your ancestors went through became hard-coded in their genes and passed down to you. Thus, you believe and behave in much the same way that they do. I have a question here, but since it's 156, I'm going to avoid going down this path. But I'm just going to ask you a question. Could it be that aggressive behavior towards other groups was beaten and lynched out of many of our ancestors, leading to behavioral changes over hundreds of years? Could it be that we were bred to be docile? Could it be that we were bred to fight one another? It's just a question.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Question that we're going to go in on. So just to summarize that first circle, I'm losing my voice again. Just to summarize that first circle, the vast majority of your relationship comes from two sources, first 7 years of your life and your ancestors. But the good news is that as a divine being, you are malleable. Remember, this first circle is not you. This is not your divine essence. But by bringing it into your awareness, I'm putting control over these circles into your hand. Although things happen to you in those first 7 years of your life,
and although certain emotional responses have been hard-coded within you, certain experiences have been hard-coded within you, this is the field of study known as epigenetics. You, in your divine capacity, have the ability to change these things. Now, remember, your mission is not to change your personality. It's not to change the past. Your mission is not to deny your emotions, but to harness all that energy to create something new. Remember, we talked about condensation? Matter not being created or destroyed. Your mission is not to abolish your lower self. It is to make your lower self the servant of your higher self. That's what I want to reiterate to you all. It's impossible to rid yourself of emotion, and it's suicidal to attempt to destroy any part of yourself. In fact, your ancestors in Kemet did not believe that Isfet or the lower self could be completely defeated. They understood that Isfet would always exist. Humans would always be susceptible to it, and that Isfet would continue to exist as long as humans exist. Therefore, your task is to accentuate and fortify your strengths and divert the energy from your dark side, so that way you can return to your divine pure essence and reestablish kind of your relationship with yourself. So let me get back on topic. This is why it's important for you all to take an ancestry test. But aside, there are other people out there saying that you shouldn't be taking ancestry tests. And they are right, except that it gives you, again, I'm not arguing with the efficacy of the science. I'm arguing with what they do with the knowledge that they get. All right. So there are a small handful of companies out there, and I'm keeping a close eye on them. And I'm making sure that if they collect information, then they're not using that information later on down the line. Like there's legacy laws put in place that protect you, right? And your DNA. But I'm advocates of taking DNA tests. Your blood doesn't lie. The people collecting the data from your blood may lie, but your blood doesn't lie. All right. So that's an important tool. But another important tool is actually talking to your family, creating a family tree. This is another aspect of the second circle, your ascendants and your descendants, your parents and your children, right? Those who you can learn the most from and give the most to. Do the work of creating your family tree if you haven't done so already. This is going to give you the opportunity to strengthen relationships with people that you might not have a relationship with. And if you do, a relationship that needs to be repaired. Look, everybody talks about issues in our community. Our community starts with our families. Our community, this entire community, starts at home. If your family is in disarray, our community will be in disarray. And then your extended circle of kinship, which are your sexual partners, because when women have sex with men, there's an exchange of energy, which is what we abbreviate sex as, sexual energy exchange, right? And ultimately, the new tissue that's formed is a combination of the tissues between the two partners. In other words, the bloodline changes within the womb. So she is a part of your second circle. If you are a king, queens, if you integrate into a new family, they become a part of your second circle. When it comes to relationships with your family, sometimes healing means just spending time with them, asking questions, and looking beyond your immediate family to build new relationships. In other words, reaching out to your distant cousins, because all of them are reflections of you. They all have the same hard-coded data to greater or lesser extents than you have. So in the process of learning about yourself, you need to learn about them. But before you reach out to your relatives, I want you to make sure you know what you want to get out of the interaction. All right? It might not be reasonable for you to try and go and make amends with relatives who abused you, who you've fallen out with immediately. But all it takes is a slow cultivation. Go and see your father in prison or your brother in prison. Send them an email if you want to maintain your distance. Understand that your family members may not be doing the light work that you are doing, and they may not be ready to overcome their own lower vibrations, their own lower self. Accept that, but you've got to accept them anyway. Your role in the process of reaching out to members of your family that you may be estranged from, or members of your family that you may be amicable with, is to gain knowledge, understanding, compassion, and empathy for those family members. Because although your family might not be as unified as you want it to be, at least it won't be broken. So one of the discussions that we need to have in the forum and moving forward is how we heal relationships with family members who have abused us in the past. That's a hard one. For some of you all, it's unimaginable. But don't tell me what's impossible, because you are a divinity. You have the power to transcend space and time, as you're going to see. Moving forward. Third circle is a relationship with your peers. We need to talk very briefly about how relationships with your peers are formed. And this is a circle that you have complete control over. If you are conscious, if you are unconscious, you are forced into a culture. You are forced into a nation. You are forced into a job where you're surrounded by people that you cannot stand under certain situations. You're forced into a community. All right. This is what we mean when we say forced integration. What I want you to practice is conscious cultivation. There are three things that you need to master. You need to master the art and science of knowing people, feeling people, and understanding their dark side. All right? Knowledge, feeling, understanding. I want to read you a quick passage from The Laws of Human Nature, and it reads this. Principal problem that we face in this social arena is our naive tendency to project onto people our emotional needs and desires of the moment. We misread their intentions and react in ways that cause confusion or conflict. Social intelligence is the ability to see people in the most realistic light possible. By moving past our usual self-absorption, we can learn to focus deeply on others, reading their behavior in the moment, seeing what motivates them, and discerning any possible manipulative tendencies. Navigating smoothly the social environment, we have more time and energy to focus on learning and acquiring skills. Success attained without this knowledge is not true mastery, and it will not last. In other words, you've got to get damn good at learning people in order to know which ones to bring into your life and which ones to keep strong boundaries with. Affinity, learning how to feel people. I want you to get good at feeling the energy that people put off, even online, particularly online. And I know it's more difficult online, but you can hear it in the tone of their voice. You can hear it in their comments. For instance, there are some so-called personalities out there that are always on the attack. Why? Is it always necessary to be on the attack? Is this a reflection of Mayat? You're constantly exposing someone, but we know nothing about you. We know that you sound good. We know that you look good. We know that your videos are dope. We know that you're throwing a bunch of data at us. But this data is always to tear somebody else down, to create more division. This is not something that you can read. This is something that you must feel. Unailewa, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at the same time, you've got to understand and empathize with the fact that just like you have a dark side, just like you might have deep narcissism, just like you may have sexual impulses or other impulses that are sometimes out of your control, so too do they. See people's dark side and then make a determination as to whether or not you can deal with that. There are certain people that should never be in your life. These are people that are entropic in nature. Does anybody know what entropic means while checking on the chat room?
No.
No.
Okay, just everybody saying got it. All right. Let me see what we got. Okay, so entropy. In nature, entropy it describes something that draws energy, right? Something that sucks up heat. Things that suck the life force out of you. There are people that you get around and you automatically feel tired, right? As soon as you get around them, you feel drained. You don't know people like that?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
you just want to sigh as soon as they come around. These are entropic people. This is what I mean by feeling people. There are people who you are around that energize you, that make you think, man, I could really be doing something more with myself, that bring you closer to your divinity. And then there are people, as soon as you see them coming, it's almost like from a distance, the depth of their dark side draws energy out of you. It's a vampiric energy. They're feeding off of you to replace something that they lack or to satiate something that they lack. Those are the people that you need to get out of your life. You need to feel for those people. You can do it online. Just sit back and listen to people. They'll exhaust you after a while.
Yeah,
These are the
they
people that you need to
sick.
avoid. Go ahead. Yeah, right.
That they can make you sick, literally sick.
True indeed. But you will not be able to trust people until you know their dark side. So you need to actively seek out their dark side. The true and living, they're aware of their darkness, right? They're aware of their narcissism. They're aware of their impulses. They're aware of all these things. And they speak about these things comfortably. But as you bring new people into your circle, ask those questions. Some people may not be prepared to talk about them. And if they're not, then you need to look for evidence of their dark side. I'll have a conversation with brothers. What kind of women do you normally deal with? Okay. Tell me about your last relationship. And of course it's not formatted like an interview, but in the conversation, maybe they'll tell me about some philosophies that they have that may be misplaced, that may be indicative of their dark side. I need to know about their dark side because I need to know if I can trust you. Right. I can trust you if you've done terrible things in the past and you're honest about it. How does the saying go in the South? It's not the rattlesnake you need to be scared of, it's the water moccasin.
Yeah.
Why? Because the rattlesnake will let you know it's coming. The water moccasin is quiet.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm telling you to do as a divine being, first of all, you've got to have your Nia in place. Because if you don't have your Nia in place, then who should you be attracting? Right? Who aligns with your Nia? This is a question that will remain unanswered unless you have your Nia in place. Once you have your Nia in place, it's time for you to start auditing your circle. Audit everyone in your circle, everyone that you interact with for longer than just a few minutes. All right. So you don't have to audit the person at the grocery store or the bank. Right. These aren't people in your circle. I'm talking about auditing your peers. I'm talking about auditing the classmates that you're around. I'm talking about auditing the people that you work around, which is why entrepreneurship is so important, because now you can decide the people that you are around. All right. You've absolutely got to plot out your family tree for a few reasons. Number one, first of all, we talk about restoring our community and the integrity thereof. But more importantly, you need to not just know their names, but know their stories. Because what has been encoded in them, what's been hard coded in them in the past, has been passed down to you. And in understanding their story and what they went through, you can understand how you came to be, which is an important part of developing knowledge of self. So we talked about the aspects of the third circle. The third circle is your peers. All right. So remember, the first circle is your relationship with yourself. Second circle, your family, your bloodlines. All right. Third circle, your peers. Okay. I'm just going to read this if you can't see my screen. The law of resonance is the universal law which determines various vibratory patterns or frequencies, which are determined and projected based on various thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and the resulting projected frequency, which activates the law of attraction, ensuring that this resonance or projected energy can only harmonize with energies that vibrate or resonate at a similar harmonious vibratory frequency, which determine and create your physical results. In other words, the world around you is produced and is a direct result of the energies of the people around you. Hang around hood rats, you will become a hood rat. If you are unconscious, if you are conscious, you can raise their vibrations. The seeker seeks to liberate themselves from forced integration in favor of conscious cultivation. And then the fourth circle. The objective here is to cultivate relationships that are representations of your Nia. All right. So you want to find enlighteners. Have you ever said to yourself, if I knew then what I know now, I would have done something differently? Has anybody ever said that?
Yeah.
Yes.
See, a good mentor would have given you those lessons. And even if you made the mistake that they warned you about, and I did because I'm hard-headed, you would be more resilient in the face of setbacks. In other words, you'd be able to bounce back quicker. If you had a business mentor, if you had a money mentor, do you believe you'd be doing better financially today?
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. If I dropped a multi-million-dollar woman or man in your backyard and like, you know, I'm here to give you all the knowledge that I have, you would do better. You may not be a multimillionaire, but you wouldn't be broke. Right? Now, let me flip the coin.
Right.
Do you believe that right now you have more knowledge or experience or wisdom than someone 10 years younger than you?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. In that case, you should be mentoring them. There's power in both of these relationships. I'm going to read what I have on the screen real quick if you can't see it. The enlightener-protege relationship is the most efficient and productive form of learning. The right enlighteners know where to focus your attention and how to challenge you. Their knowledge and experience become yours. They provide immediate and realistic feedback on your work so you can improve more rapidly. Through an intense person-to-person interaction, you absorb a way of thinking that contains great power and can be adapted to your individual spirit. Choose the enlightener who best fits your needs and connects to your life's task. Once you have internalized their knowledge, aspire to match their mastery and brilliance as their peer while becoming an enlightener to others. I have enlighteners in every area of my life that I've specifically cultivated. I looked at my physical element and said, this is what I want to achieve. Right? I want to be 175 pounds of muscle and combat ability and energy so that I can defend myself and my family and never be afraid again. Remember going back to my childhood, right? I have a metaphysical mentor in the form of Baba Ashra Kwesi and Baba Phil Valentine. Actually, Baba Phil Valentine more so because I haven't spoken to Baba Ashra Kwesi in quite some time, right? I have a metaphysical mentor, a spiritual mentor. I have a money mentor, right? I have a couple of those, actually. When it comes to real estate, it's absolutely Jay Morrison. Maybe you need a yoga mentor. Maybe you need an alkaline diet mentor. It depends on your Nia. All right. But you should absolutely find someone who's further behind you on the path and start mentoring them. Cultivating a good mentor-mentee relationship is it's difficult. It's a skill set, but one that is worthy of being learned, because in the process, you're establishing relationships with people who match your frequency. Not only are you learning, but you are learning to learn. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I have another question for engagement, and I do want to ask this question. I want to hear from you all very briefly. Enlightener protege relationships are important. In fact, they're critical in our community. They're absolutely critical. The reason why I'm here is because I have a mentor, right? I have an enlightener. That's the only reason why my life changed. My enlightener in the form of Asad Malik, and now in the form of my other mentors across my 5 elements of life, are the reason why I'm successful today. What aspect of the lower self would prevent you from taking on an enlightener or a protege? I'm going to list out the aspects of the lower self really briefly, and I want you all to think about that as I list these out. So aspects of the lower self is fed, covetousness, envy, selfishness, dogmatism, hypocrisy or falsehood, atrocities, promiscuity, deep narcissism, negativity, overwhelming shame, schadenfreude, inability to empathize with others, extremism and polarity, distrust and untrustworthiness rather, argumentativeness, impulsivity, cowardice. Which one of those would stop you from taking on an enlightener or a protege?
Selfishness, narcissism, empathy, distrust.
Hold on, why narcissism?
Because I probably am. I guess that leads to the empathy part of it. Like, I'm just. I would be more so. I'm a little impatient. With people. Like, as far as the understanding, sometimes I'm like, why don't, if you want it, then why aren't you getting it? Why aren't you moving forward? Or, and I don't have that empathy or patience for people like that. So then that can lead to the distress part. Because then I'm like, people just talk. And so now I'm wasting my time because they just are running me in a circle. And now I'm in their insanity circle. So I guess I feel like I don't have like myself concrete enough to go be involved with other energy that is not positive for me, because I suck it up and I just am all in it, and I feel people too. I think I feel people too much, and I can't. It's hard for me to put it like separate myself, my feelings, how I feel, and how I want it to be. Okay. I don't know if I.
No, it makes perfect sense, and I do want to say that your ability to feel people so deeply, that capacity for empathy, means that you have the capacity to change lives in a positive way, because you can relate to people in ways that other people can't. So that's definitely not a bad thing. You've got to learn how to harness it and use it to those ends. This is a strength. This is a power that will destroy you, because if you surround yourself with the wrong vibrations
right now,
you surround yourself with the wrong vibrations, and you will take those vibrations in. You become a vessel for their negativity.
Exactly what has happened.
Which is why you've got to isolate and elevate yourself until you have enough strength to deal with those people in ways that raise their vibrations without costing you yours, without being so entropic for you. Deep narcissists believe that they are supreme in their own mind, which means that, of course, I'm not going to take on an enlightener. What would they have to teach me? Right? If anything, they'll see themselves as peers with these greats. In fact, there's a member of the community that produced a very popular series of documentaries. They're bragging that they're better than some of the people that they had on. You mean to tell me you think you've exceeded the achievements of people like Dr. Phil Valentine, Francis Cress Welsing, when all you did was put a camera in their face and ask them questions? And then that person will point to their numbers and say, I have 1.5 million people following me on Twitter. I don't give a goddamn. Yeah. Many people are on the path to destruction, but few find the gate.
Right.
That leads to the apex of the mountain. When it comes to narcissists, they are supreme in their own mind. And all this is always based on what? Insecurity.
Supreme in their own mind.
True indeed. But once you've addressed your insecurity and admitted it to yourself, then you can do the work of correcting it, building true strength, true knowledge, gaining true accomplishments, things that will transcend you, things that make the collective better, not just yourself, right?
The issue is not just the narcissism, that's a big thing, but the hypocrisy. Because I have been burned and been what I feel like lured in by people who, or a particular person who just had the silver tongue, had the gift of gab, had the, all about the conscious community and, king this and queen that or whatever. And then, at the end of the day, it turned out that this person was the biggest liar, the biggest hypocrite, the biggest, you not practicing what you're talking and what you're posting type of thing.
True.
And then once you learn that about a person, and once that you realize that a person, it just makes you very skeptical about who you can trust, who you can take into your inner circle, who you can believe that what they're saying is actually they're practicing what they're preaching. And that has been my problem. Let's do a quick practice session then. Right.
Because remember, distrust and untrustworthiness are part of the lower self. This is fit, right? Now, it's likely that the signs were already there, but you didn't know what to look for, or you weren't looking for them, right? Remember earlier on, I said that attention allows, or you ignored them. Attention allows you to disassemble illusion, which is why I always tell you all, if you all know the truth from within, then you cannot be lied to or deceived from without. But oftentimes we're not paying attention because aspects of our lower and higher self. So how do we retool that distrust and the energy that you get from it to bring balance to your life? How do we retool that? What should we be doing instead? Let's do some past authoring.
How do you trust again? How do you trust again? How do you look past that? Okay, this is not everyone. This is just that particular person.
Oh no, it's everyone. Everyone has the potential. Everyone has and this is what I've been emphasizing. Everyone has the potential to do to you what that person did. And earlier I think I said it very quickly, but let me reemphasize this. You learn to trust others by understanding their dark side.
Did.
But you've got to see it. You've got to actively look for it, Queen. And that's to everybody. That's for everybody. This is a skill that must be developed. You've got to know and understand their dark side. And once you do, you can interface and understand and then decide whether or not you want to deal with them. Does that make sense, Queen?
Yes, it does.
So going forward, if we're practicing some past authoring, we're going to actively look for the bad in people, not to eliminate them from our lives, but so that we are aware that it exists, and then we can make a proper determination as to whether or not we're going to allow that energy to exist around us. And when that energy starts to manifest itself, we know what we're looking at. We know that at our core, at everyone's core, there is divinity. At everyone's core, there is divinity. But some of us are further removed from that divinity than others. And as the enlightened ones in this conscious community, we've got to be able to see that in others. So if we do some past authoring, as I'm engaging with this person, I'm hearing all the blessings and peace, queen and king, I respect you and all of these things. But I'm also looking at your social media posts, and I'm looking at the people that you've dealt with in the past. And I'm looking at how you respond to people in the comments if I've never met you. Or if we're out to eat, I'm looking at how you treat the other people around you. I want to talk to you about your kids. What's your relationship with your father like? And this is always a good one. The relationship with the parents is always a great place to start, because they'll either immediately hit you with typically they'll hit you with ambiguity, like, we really don't have a relationship. And then you can continue to ask questions about that. They'll hit you with negativity, like, we're not going to talk about that. Right? Or sometimes they will shift from a conversation about their parents back to themselves, which is indicative of narcissism. Because the deep narcissist, to a deep narcissist, the parents are an item. This is a toy in their lives. This is my favorite toy. My life was blessed growing up as a kid. I did this and I loved that. I'm not asking about you. I'm asking about your parents. Right? Whereas the enlightened ones, and it's amazing to have this conversation, I know what my mother was struggling with. I know what my father was struggling with. I know some of the characteristics that they passed down to me, some of the challenges that, and the reasons why they behave the way there's a lot of empathy that I have for my parents. My mother was 16 when she had me. I think a lot of you all can relate to that. Some of you might have had children young. So, you can ask them how they dealt with their parents, ask them about other relationships in their lives, right? And their response, be it positive, negative, or apathetic, will tell you a lot about what you need to know. So when you're learning how to read people, that's what you really need to dig deep into.
But, again, it just makes me pay more attention to patterns of behavior than the gift of gab or
all it is.
patterns of your speech.
Absolutely.
Patience and watching.
This is about cultivation. So now that we are at the end of our discussion, I want to talk about realigning your relationships. The qualifications of the people in your life are not based on their credentials, but based on your nia. Your mission thus becomes to realign your four circles to create synchronicity with your purpose. I want you to do a full relationship audit. All right. I want you to do a full relationship audit. I want you to set goals for each circle that you're a part of. You have trouble setting goals in your relationship element, goal for yourself. Number one, gain a clear understanding of your personality, your emotions, and your dark side. All right. Gain a clear understanding of your personality, your emotions, and your dark side. For your second circle, this is easy. Do a family tree or ancestry test. Easy way to do this, go to 16personalities.com and take the test there. All right. I'm gonna be asking you all for your personality types. Okay. And then we're gonna break down what those four letters mean. Now, this is a Western test, but it's a good indicator. All right. We'll give you some more accurate tests as time goes on. So that's for your first circle. Your second circle, family tree, ancestry test. All right. So if you go to panafricanalliance.com, I'll list some ancestry tests there. Avoid ancestry.com. You can spit in that tube if you want to, but I'm telling you what they're using your information for. Read that article. I don't care how cheap it is. I don't care how accurate it is. I don't care what other people have said about ancestry.com. If you've already spit in the tube, there's nothing you can do. I don't know if you all know who Henrietta Lacks is, but if you're listening to this recording, pause it, do a little research, and yeah, that's what's happening to your spit. And trust and believe they're finding a way to formulate melanin in a way that can be consumed and used by non-melanated beings. We'll get into that later. That's more conspiracy theory than conspiracy fact because I don't have any documentation to back it up, but we'll talk about it.
Sounds right.
It's real though. It's real.
Sounds right.
So that's your relationship goal for your second circle. For your third circle, easy relationship goal, do an audit and cultivate relationships with those on the same path as you, but that means you got to find them too. So you're using things like meetup.com. You're out there in the community. You're learning how to feel people. You're going to have to do some reading. I have some required reading that you should do on how to read people and pick up on their energies and things to look for. And then your final goal for your fourth circle, find mentors and mentees. These are people who have achieved what you want in each area of your life and learn from them. These are non-family members. I saw what you put in chat, Joe. Non-family members. You should be doing that with your family anyway. You should be working as an enlightener or a protege for members of your family anyway. All right. But we're talking about non-family members. Now, before you get to that point, you got to think about what you want in a mentor. You have to think about what you want to achieve. You've got to have goals established already. You've got to have your NIA aligned. And maybe you've had to go through some experiences where you, or maybe you will have to go through some experiences where you'll get a person and you think this is the right mentor and it just doesn't work out. Again, this is about cultivation. It's hard. It's easy to grow weeds. It's damn near impossible to grow orchids. But when you pull it off, you have something of value. All right. I just want to emphasize before we wrap up here that you can be compromised by who you let into your circle and what you allow within the domain of your internal. So you need to be careful about letting the right ones in, and you need to be brutal about keeping the wrong ones out.